Indiana Lawmakers is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by the Indy Chamber, working to unite business and community to maintain a strong economy and quality of life.
Indiana Lawmakers, from the State House to your house. Welcome to the first regular session of Indiana's 124th General Assembly, better known as the 2025 Long Session. Here's a quick refresher on what can seem like a pretty convoluted process. Like anything that produces winners and losers, the Indiana General Assembly tends to be defined by numbers. As many of us learned back in civics class, Indiana's legislative branch comprises two bodies: the House of Representatives, which has 100 members who serve two-year terms, and the Senate, which has 50 members who face voters every 4 years. In theory, based on district maps redrawn after the 2020 census, each House member represents 67,855 Hoosiers, while each senator answers to 135,711 constituents. At the moment, Republicans outnumber Democrats 70-30 in the House and 40-10 in the Senate, just as they did before November's election. Because Republicans constitute supermajorities in both chambers, that is, they make up more than 2/3 of members, they by themselves can provide the quorums necessary to conduct business. Don't assume, however, that party affiliation alone determines how a lawmaker will vote on any given issue. Last year, members of the General Assembly introduced 714 pieces of legislation dealing with dozens of topics. Although a number of those proposals triggered fierce debate, all but 4 of the 172 bills that ultimately reached the governor's desk enjoyed at least some degree of bipartisan support, and 73 of them passed both chambers unanimously. Keep in mind that before a bill can reach the governor's desk, it must survive 3 readings, or clearly defined procedural stages, in the chamber where it's introduced, and then repeat the same 3-part process in the other chamber. A lot of proposals never get out of the gate, and those that do can die at any point along the way. Bills that do make it through the General Assembly, and actually at that point they're called enrolled acts, but let's not get hung up on minutia, still aren't a done deal, as they can be vetoed by the governor. Of course, vetoes can be overridden by a simple legislative majority, that is at least 51 votes in the House and 26 votes in the Senate. Last year, Governor Eric Holcomb issued 1 veto, which lawmakers opted not to challenge. Now, as for timing, in odd-numbered years, when 2-year state budgets are crafted, the General Assembly meets for up to 61 session days, and session days are not necessarily consecutive calendar days, and must adjourn by April 29. Sessions in even-numbered years are capped at 30 session days, with adjournment coming no later than March 14. Unless otherwise specified, Indiana's new laws will take effect July 1, the start of the state's fiscal year. Now, if all of this seems a bit overwhelming, don't worry. Throughout the session, the team here at Indiana Lawmakers will be working nonstop, or should I say 24/7, to sort out what's happening and to explain what it means for you, your family, and your community. After all, for us, that's job one. And welcome back to part 2 of our special leadership conversation. I am pleased to welcome House Speaker Todd Huston, a Fishers Republican, House Minority Leader Phil GiaQuinta, a Fort Wayne Democrat, Senate President Pro Tem Rodric Bray, a Martinsville Republican, and Senate Minority Leader Shelli Yoder, a Bloomington Democrat. Shelli Yoder, you said there's some concerns and warning bells that you see in the air as it relates to schools. Talk about that.
Well, for our caucus, we're going to be focused on really lifting up those professions that the majority of Hoosier parents trust. And they do trust their public school teachers. And currently, over half of them make less than $50,000. And so we're proposing that we lift those salaries up to $65,000 and make sure that we are paying them, I mean, even $65,000, but at least we can do better than we're currently doing, paying them for the work that they do and how Hoosier parents, the majority, 90%, are trusting in our public school system to educate our kids and make sure that they're getting the skills that they need to enter this next phase, which would be the global workforce.
Well, certainly teacher salaries have been a front burner issue for several sessions now, in part because of concerns about a teacher shortage. But can they expect another bump?
Well, look, I mean, we're pleased that we set a goal that the average teacher pay to be over $60,000. It is. The report just came out and said that. We said we wanted starting teacher pay to go up. It has. Credit to local schools. Local schools make those decisions. I mean, as we noted earlier, we fund education over $9 billion a year. But we don't tell schools how big their class sizes are. We don't tell them how many teachers they should have, how many counselors they should have, what their age should be. That's up to the local school districts to make those decisions. And obviously, the more people you put in the pie, the pie gets the less amount of money there is for each individual in that pie. So they have to make those decisions locally. I think it's our job and our responsibility to fund. Again, we'll put in well over $9 billion this year in the K-12 education. And then it needs to decide at the local level on how teachers are paid. And so appropriately, that's the right place it should be.
And certainly compensation is important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle in terms of job satisfaction for our state's educators.
Well, I would like to say that we certainly have made some progress with teacher salaries. However, we still are experiencing a teacher shortage. And I think part of the issue has just been this constantly tinkering with education policy year after year after year. I talk with not only Democrat colleagues, but certainly even Republican colleagues that would just say, man, can we just take a little bit of a pause here, a break, and see what we have put in place in the last couple of years. Is it working? How can we measure against something if it's continuing to change? So, and that's, I think, been a big frustration for teachers as well, that this constant changing, and they would just like to be able to teach and at least teach and use the things that they've been required to do and see if that works or not. So this continuing changing of the policies that we've had, I do think is driving a lot of teachers out of the profession.
Do you think that's more of a concern than, for instance, a specific type of licensure requirement that some may see as onerous?
That's part of the issue.
Part of the issue. How about, Rod Bray, this notion? We got some good news in recent days, which was that the high school graduation rate for students in Indiana was a record high in 2024. So why not sit back and say, hey, we must be doing something right?
We've made several changes over the last several years to education, and so it would be nice to take a break on some of those things and say, all right, how are we doing? I think it shows Indiana has been improving over the years as we rate or compare nationally to the other states, so we're very proud of that. But nevertheless, I think there's still some work to do in certain topics, and you'll see our Education Committee, the House Education Committee, also have bills that they'll work on, debate, and discuss as to whether they're appropriate to move forward with or not. And so because it's the most important thing the state of Indiana does, we'll certainly work in that space.
And Todd, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, look, I think a House priority bill will be a deregulation bill. I think there's a lot of things that are unnecessary, and I agree with Leader GiaQuinta on that are unnecessary, and frankly, we put in the statute.
Give us a few examples.
We'll roll that out as part of our agenda, but we're going through all of.
You could give us a little, throw us a bone here. Come on.
But I mean, there's just a ton of things that we've heard through the years from administrators and schools that say, that's just unnecessary. Many around reporting requirements, John, that just take up time and unnecessary resources, and we can certainly do that. But I think it is important to note, through this entire discussion, that not only we funded schools, but we're thrilled with the results. We have seen higher graduation rates. I think you're seeing schools really take advantage and are excited about the changes of what's taking place in the high school diploma process. So as I talk to the schools, it's been great to hear their feedback and the way they're thinking about this.
And this is something, and reading results. 2023, you said that there should be a new one, and now the State Board of Education is close to finalizing. And
now they love the flexibility of the new one. And then our reading results are up. We made investments in science and reading. We said reading's important in the state. We should never think about any student at the third grade level who we know that is the gateway of success. If they can't read at the end of third grade, it puts a barrier up that most kids will never overcome. We've made tremendous investments in that, and science and reading has been bipartisan. I'm grateful and thankful for the bipartisan and bicameral leadership on this. But, so I think there's some positive things. I think we need to clear some space in the deregulatory aspect, and we look forward to doing that this year.
You talk about deregulation and the notion, I guess, that let teachers teach and students learn, and that's how it should be. And yet your caucus and certainly Republicans in the Senate in recent years have pushed for, you could say, more government oversight of how teachers, whether it's review of textbooks with parent committees, and some of this made it and some didn't. So I'm not suggesting.
Well, I'm not sure.
But you also had reporting requirements among teachers whose kids might be identifying as a different gender, or I mean, these were all bills that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of bills, John. I don't know what gets into laws, but
right.
But I want to be fair to this. Like, yes, there has been too much. I think we would acknowledge there's been too much. Of all of it. I mean, like, you know, what we need to do is look and see what are the priorities. But a lot of times these suggestions come for everybody wants a report on the topic that matters most to them. Everybody wants the issue on the topic that matters, wants the law on the topic that matters most to them. And what we're saying is look, we have to, at the end of the day, we have to trust the local administrator. We have to trust the local administrator. Now, I don't want to confuse that. Parents should have every right to know. Every right to know. And this, when things are decided, they should be done, you know, and whether it's the curriculum issues.
Between certain types of regulation and oversight and other types.
Certain types of regulation.
Library books, what can be in library shelves.
Well, look, I mean,
schools.
Yeah, I think a community should have input in that. I think
sex ed programming.
Yeah, I think a community should have impact in that, involvement in those types of decisions, and making sure that it's not just whether the books in the library, but certainly where in the library and what's age appropriate. But my bigger point is that, look, we want to make sure that school administrators have the flexibility to do what they think is best for kids, and the deregulatory aspect is something we're excited about.
Phil GiaQuinta, are you heartened to hear that there's no appetite for further regulation and government involvement with teachers and the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, and I also just would add, hopefully, that we're going to include educators and teachers in these discussions, superintendents as well. I hope that they're involved in these when we're talking about the type of bills that we're hearing about potential of deregulation or clearing some things up. And because I think maybe you said it best, John, is let's let these teachers teach. That's what they want to do. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they enjoy doing. And that's why they got into the profession. And these are the type of things that have driven teachers out of the profession, just too much regulation and trying to do these things that get in the way of teaching students. So I'm happy to hear that.
One bill would take any school district that has fewer than 50% of the students eligible students in its jurisdiction not attending those schools. They would be disbanded, dissolved, and I guess the state would turn them over to charters. Rod Bray, what do you think?
Well, I think that's a House bill. I haven't looked at that yet. And again,
no, Rod Bray not thrilled with House bill.
Well, I think the speaker said earlier that there's an awful lot of bills. We're going to file as a body in the House and the Senate over 1,000 bills this year, and we're going to have to take a look at the ones that actually pass. About 20% of those will actually get across the finish line to the governor's desk and get signed. And so we'll try and be thoughtful about all of those. But with regard to, I can't speak specifically about that bill because I don't know anything about it. But I think there will be a conversation. There has been a conversation over the last few years about charter schools and property taxes. There's a gap between charter schools and traditional public schools. Charter schools obviously are public schools, but there's a distinction between them and traditional public schools, and there's a gap because they don't have access to property taxes. A couple of years ago, through Senator Rogers' bill, I believe it was, there was a small change in that in 4 counties that have most of the charter schools, that there's started a conversation to share some of that property tax so that money, again, consistent with what we've been doing across the state, that money follows the student.
So if I'm the district that wages the levy battle and I win, if you're a charter school in my area, you're going to share in the bounty. I mean,
yes, that's part of the conversation.
Should that be extended? That was, again, 4 jurisdictions.
You'll see the conversation to grow that happen this year. Whether it passes or not, I don't know, but it'll be an interesting conversation that I think people need to follow.
But since that other one was a House bill.
Yeah, I want to say more than 1 in 4 kids in Indiana choose a school outside of their neighborhood school to go to. The vast majority of school choices in Indiana is between a public school to another public school.
Is that good or bad? Or,
I think it's great.
Or some would say that the best thing is to improve the school that's down the street.
But that gives the school the motivation to improve. Well, they know that those kids can go somewhere else. They're going to provide as good a product as they can.
Well, just the notion that a kid may need a different type of school. Like it isn't an indictment on the school that they left oftentimes. They may need a smaller school. They may need a school in which there are different types of activities. But I think the conversation is, again, if more than 1 in 4 kids are not going to the school of their neighborhood school, then again, if we have a state policy, which I think has been wildly successful, wildly popular, by the way, to allow money to follow the student, then the discussion, I think what Senator Bray has noted, the discussion should be had, should more of the money follow the public school student, whether they're going to another traditional public school or to a charter school? That'll be a discussion that's had. Where we end up, I don't know.
Before we leave it, the dissolution, if I may, since it's a House bill, the dissolution of these districts that fall into that fewer than 50%, that's IPS, Indianapolis Public Schools. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, look, I begin first and foremost, and I've told IPS very directly this, and I'll continue, that I think they have partnerships with charter schools. The majority of the kids in IPS, as noted in the bill, don't go to the traditional public schools. So I'm not sure why IPS gets all the local property tax dollars. So that's the conversation we'll have.
Shelli, Yoder, you had something to say?
I do want to interject because it seems contradictory. And sort of in one answer, it's about giving local control, the ability to make those decisions. And then the next one is let the state, like in 1136, make that decision for local political subdivisions like schools. And which way are we going to have it?
Is there an inconsistency? Can you explain reconcile the two?
First of all, she has a point, and I want to make sure. John, as we all know, I always make this comment, I probably should have at the beginning. Don't judge us where we start. Don't judge us in the middle. Judge us where we end. A lot of bills are filed. They work themselves through the process. You have to start somewhere, but where you end is someplace completely different. Where this all ends, I think Senator Yoder will not find inconsistency, but I understand her point right now.
GiaQuinta, weigh in on this part before we move on to some other topics.
Well, I was told that charter schools were going to save us money. Now all of a sudden we have to figure out how we're going to fund them. Also, I've always heard that we have to have competition. Now this bill wants to apparently eliminate competition by eliminating the school corporations. Also, particularly up in my area, we have a lot of students that choose to go to parochial schools, religious schools. That's fine. But when we're starting to put that category, when we're calculating the number to get us to this percentage, I don't think that's fair because obviously public schools can't teach religion. So I think there's a lot of problems with this bill. I haven't read it either that much that closely, but just what I've seen in the media, I think there's going to be a lot of concerns and issues with this going forward. So.
To this point,
can I tell one more thing?
Sure.
Too, just the data that I've seen. We like to be data-driven. It does show that charter schools really are not performing very well. They just aren't. They've got a few that do well, but for the most part, they're really not doing that well. And that should be a concern for all of us. They close in October, November, and then leaving students out in the cold to have to choose another school. So I think we should really kind of take a look at those type of schools that just really aren't doing well. And that's a fact.
I don't know. The Stanford study, the Notre Dame studies all say the charter schools in Indianapolis outperform the district schools. So I'm not sure what studies that's referring to. And as every time we get these notions of the charter schools dump kids after count dates, we found that not to be true at all. So I think, I don't know why the hostility towards families getting to pick schools or schools, there being different options for schools. But I think, again, we went to a money follows a student policy a long time ago. We've given families options. I would note it is extraordinarily popular. This is why you now see elections ran on this policy anymore, because it is extraordinarily popular, and our caucus is pleased to support it, and we'll continue to support it.
Let's shift it a little bit here for the remainder of our discussion and talk about some of the financial pressures on Hoosiers. Energy costs have been going up significantly. We used to have some of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the country. Now, still not in the bad ranking, but moving up. Same thing with healthcare costs. Let's take them in that order, I guess. Energy costs. And Rod Bray, let's go to you. What can Hoosiers count on lawmakers doing this session to make sure that their utility bills are kept, if not kept reasonable?
Well, so first of all, you're right. We've watched our energy costs as we compare to other states kind of creep up since the early 2000s. A disturbing factor. It's very difficult to figure out exactly why that's happening. This is a very complicated industry, and but we've been working in that space, trying to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen because it's hard right now. Everything's more expensive. Going to the grocery store is more expensive. Paying your light bill is more expensive, and so we're trying to figure that out and put some downward pressure on that.
One thing is giving the Utility Regulatory Commission more, well, they already have, some would argue, the authority, but they're being told to be more aggressive in terms of halting or slowing the closure of fossil fuel plants, coal plants, and others. Is that? Yeah,
that's right. And it's not to try and save coal. It's just to make sure that we have a diverse amount of resources that people can use to generate power for us. And we've got lots of challenges in the state of Indiana with regard to our utilities. Capacity is one of them because we've experienced such growth over the last several years that, in particular, things like data centers use an awful lot of power. And so it's a challenge to have enough capacity. So we don't need to be shutting down any plants right now because we need that capacity to help, and more of that capacity can help keep the cost down.
Phil GiaQuinta, do you buy into the whole all of the above approach, meaning that bring in solar, bring in wind, but don't get rid of coal too fast, don't get rid of some of the other?
Well,
where are you?
I believe that the private industry they're going to make those decisions as they should.
They haven't been unfettered in that regard. I mean, we've seen legislation, moratoriums.
That's halting that, which I don't agree with. I'm not sure why we're involved in these decisions, these type of decisions that businesses are trying to make, so that they can.
Point of agreement, regulation bad across the board. I don't know, whatever topic.
That's twice now.
Twice, yeah.
But no, I think the encouragement of renewables and things like that, I think, would really go a long way in helping.
Now, your caucus, Shelli Yoder, in your district, environmental sensitivity is front and center.
Absolutely, and I do want to address this issue because Hoosiers, at the end of the day, it is about how energy costs impact their pocketbook. And we know that 174,000 Hoosiers have their utilities cut off because of failure to pay. That's 500 families a day. And the Indiana Senate Democratic Caucus has a very common sense bill that we are supporting and prioritizing this session because of the high cost of utilities. And that is, if this is the case for a family, a utility cannot cut off on Friday or the weekends or the holidays, because Hoosiers want to pay their bills. And we need to make common sense steps to make sure that they have the protections there, because we think about utilities when it's cold, but the majority of our utilities are when it's really hot. And climate change is going to continue to make it hotter and hotter. It's hard to imagine that in the dead of winter, but it's going to be warmer. And we need to make sure that families have some common sense protections there. And our caucus is working on that.
We are almost out of time, so I'm going to give you, Todd Huston, a choice. You can weigh in on this topic, or you can talk about health care costs and what you're doing to rein them in. See, I'm giving you.
I'll just say on this one, because healthcare.
Some would say they're related. If you can't, if your heat gets turned off, you might catch a cold.
Yeah, but this all of the above thing is critical, and as Senator Bray noted, that we have to have the array of energy sources available to us: coal, natural gas, wind, solar. As nuclear comes on, we want to make sure we're at the lead of that. Unfortunately, the federal policy around energy the last 4 years has been on theory and not in reality. I'm hoping that changes. We've got to be, cognizant. Every new industry.
I thought there was more drilling at the end of the Biden presidency than there was.
Look, you can't build. What they've done to the coal plants, which is cleaner than they've ever been before. Yet they're shutting them down. The regulatory aspect, they've gone after natural gas. It's harder to do natural gas plants than ever before. We've got to have relief on that because, John, energy is the driver of our economy right now, as Senator Bray noted. So it's just critical. We have to come along and partner with our companies, our energy companies, IURC, to make sure we have a great regulatory environment to have the energy we need to support Indiana businesses.
Healthcare costs, and we're going to have to close it out, I think, with this. You guys have done some things with transparency and dashboards and trying to enhance competition. And this may be one of those cases where we don't know yet. The dust is still settling. Does more need to be done?
Yes, more needs to be done. But I'll say, too, that the things that we have done already need time to work. because this is a very, very complex industry, and it's going to take a while for those things to start to pay their benefits. Hopefully they'll begin to pay dividends, but you'll still see us work in this space this year, talking about
Pre-authorization,
PBMs.
is that
Prior
legislation
authorization
going
is
to
something
go
that
anywhere?
Senator Johnson is going to bring. It's not going to be a priority bill, but we're going to have a good conversation.
This is that there wouldn't be prior authorization required in many cases.
It's certainly to limit it anyway. And pharmacy benefit managers, that conversation is going to be on the table as well.
They'd have to have a fiduciary responsibility to their or to the recipients of the benefits.
Yeah, that's correct. And that fiduciary responsibility, which is a Senator Bush bill and it's a priority bill, is going to be something that we'll talk about. It's very broad at this point, and we're going to just make sure that the insurance companies have some fiduciary responsibility to the people that they're insuring.
All right. I think we should go next time for a 4-show special edition, because clearly 2 aren't even enough.
For the record, you said that, not us.
All right. You're denying everything I'm saying that you said, but all right. All right. Thank you very much, though, for being here and weighing in, and for your ongoing commitment to Indiana and to public service. I commend you for that.
Thank you, John.
Again, our guests have been House Speaker Todd Huston, a Fishers Republican, House Minority Leader Phil GiaQuinta, a Fort Wayne Democrat, Senate President Pro Tem Rodric Bray, a Martinsville Republican, and Senate Minority Leader Shelli Yoder, a Bloomington Democrat. Time now for our weekly conversation with Ed Feigenbaum, publisher of the newsletter Indiana Legislative Insight, part of Hannah News Service. Well, we scratched the surface in terms of topics, but obviously there are a lot of issues that we haven't addressed in the roundtable. What are you going to be keeping an eye on?
Well, one thing that we're going to be watching for our newest vertical, Indiana Transportation Insight, is road funding. That's going to be an extremely important and contentious issue.
There are huge funding gaps, studies say, in terms just to keep the roads essentially where they are now.
And because we've built so much, we've got to maintain that, but we're also looking at widening so many different interstates, and there's no money to do that, and there's concern over the gas tax and whether the gas tax can sustain the road building and maintenance program given the reduction in miles driven and given the move to electric and hybrid vehicles.
What seemed like a good idea in 2018 may not apply now. But does that open the door to some of these revenue increases, whether it's fees on cell phones, whether it's new gas taxes, whether it's rideshare fees?
Yeah, I think legislators are really focused on trying to relate the taxes to something that relates to the reason for those taxes. For example, we've talked for years now about raising the cigarette tax on the show, and one thing that we've heard as well, we just don't want that going to the general fund. Well, we may see an increase of $1.50 to $2 a pack on cigarettes and other tobacco products to go to cutting the Medicaid deficit this year.
So it's not just about money, it's about trying to get a healthier Indiana citizenry.
That as well. That's a side benefit.
Any surprises before we give up that we should be looking for, or are all the cards on the table?
Well, if you paid close attention as a viewer to the show last year, we talked a lot about energy issues, and I think that's going to dominate on kind of a lesser level the legislative discussion this year.
All right. Speaking of energy, I look at you and I think energy. Ed, as always, appreciate your energy and your insight.
Thank you, John.
Every odd-numbered year, the General Assembly has one obligation: to pass a 2-year state budget. This year, the funding levels and the demands are historic. We'll dissect it all on the next Indiana Lawmakers.
Well, that concludes another edition of Indiana Lawmakers. Until next week, take care.
Indiana Lawmakers is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by the Indy Chamber, working to unite business and community to maintain a strong economy and quality of life.